Hello, my name is Bennett Goldberg. I'm a professor of physics and astronomy and director of the Searle Center for Advancing Learning and Teaching at Northwestern University. In the next 10 minutes, I'll take you quickly through a presentation about how to create social presence in your online classrooms, how to create community with your students, use the navigation tools of Zoom, start breakout meetings, use whiteboards, and use slides in your presentations. We'll talk through what the research says about social presence and give you a variety of ideas for how you can translate your in-person teaching into an online setting. The first thing I'm going to do is share my screen with you. And as I share my screen, you can see my Zoom environment. You can see a variety of tools down here on the bottom, as well as on the top that allow me to stop sharing and do other things like annotate. The next thing I'm going to do is go back to my sharing and choose the slides that I want to present. My slides are in Google Slides, and I'll use these for the next few minutes before we go back to our Zoom environment and talk more about using various techniques to create social presence. So by simply going into the presentation mode, you can talk through slides with your students and things like that. The first thing I want to do is give props to some of my colleagues, in particular Sarah Hokanson and Robin Greenler. We've been training faculty in how to do online learning and teaching in a synchronous mode through the Center of the Integration of Research, Teaching, and Learning for the past 10 years. In particular, Robin Greenler has been a leader in this kind of work. Today's learning goals are to use some of the functionality of Zoom to present content, how do you encourage and respond to student comments and ideas, and how to create breakout spaces for them. We really want to focus on minimizing student discomfort in this technology-based learning environment. We'll talk through how you can translate some of your in-person teaching techniques into a virtual environment. Before getting started in this workshop, at Northwestern, I encourage all of my faculty and graduate students participant to have a Zoom account, to update their version of Zoom to the latest one, and then to spend 10 or 15 minutes simply exploring it as a Zoom host in a meeting that they create. How do they mute and unmute their microphones, open and close chat and participant windows, type in the window to an individual or to everyone, and switch from gallery to speaker view that they may have. It's also important to figure out how to raise your hand in a many-person Zoom meeting. A couple of toolbars that you might want to navigate. This is a typical one that you often see on the bottom of your screen. There's the chat button here, a share screen, and a manage participants. If I opened the manage participants in the chat, I would see these two screens in the upper right. I'm the only person in this meeting. Otherwise, I would see all my participants below that. And then I have a chat window here on the right-hand side. Finally, when you go into sharing, this demonstrates the toolbar that is at the top of mine right now, giving you annotate and other kinds of things that you can pull down. For example, if I pull down mine, I can open up a chat window. Now mine is a floating chat window because we're in presentation mode in our Zoom meeting. The next thing I'm going to do is just give you a simple example of how you might do a whiteboard. This is a slide made in Google Slides. Equivalently, you could use PowerPoint, where I just put a bar in the middle, a little bit of text on the left, and a little bit of text on the right. And I encourage my participants to either use a chat function or an annotate function to write about how they feel about teaching online. They will often have to go up to the top and pull down view options, but in view options, there'll be an annotate button. Here, I'm opening my annotate button, choosing the text tool, going to format to choose a line width and a font size and a color. And now I can click on a space here. And what do I feel nervous about? I feel nervous about student frustration. That's something I feel nervous about. I feel nervous about students without technology, and how do we create a good environment for them. I'm excited to do breakouts run by students. and be able to have students share their work. Obviously, I'm the only one in this session, so I'm the only one typing, but it's very exciting when you have 20 to 40 people and they are working through this and telling you how they feel and demonstrating to each other and thinking through prompts. As the host participant, you can choose the select tool and move everyone's text around, which is often a very good thing when you have a lot of folks on because it gets crowded very quickly. And then the last thing here is choose your mouse tool and go over to your save button. Clicking on the save button saves an image of this. It doesn't save it as text, it just saves it as an image. And you can find that in your Zoom folder when you're done with your session. Finally, I'm going to go over and clear all the drawings. And then I'm going to go on in my talk to my next slide. What are the ways that we can ease student discomfort? We can ease student discomfort by being entirely transparent. Email ahead of time, creating community norms, revisiting those norms, transparent about assignments, transparent about actions in the course, transparent about our session guidelines and our session flow. We can display vulnerability and empathy. We can demonstrate that through our own uncertainty and our own feelings of isolation and separation in an online environment, and demonstrating empathy to our students, especially in this time of very, very difficult situations for them. We can invite feedback either through surveys, through your learning management system, or polling right here in a session. How's it going? How's it feeling? And all of that. We want to also be sure that we invite them to participate. Again and again, I can't stress this enough. Inviting students to participate is a key aspect of getting them engaged. You want to be flexible, demonstrate understanding, and demonstrate active listening in how you listen to students and respond. Here's another example of something that you could do. Here I've developed a slide with community norms. These norms I actually wrote into a Google Doc and created 6 breakouts in one Google Doc. So if I had 20 or 30 students in my classroom, I would then get out of this slide, open up my breakouts, and go into that session. I'll show you how to do that. So I'm coming out of my slides, going back to where I was a moment ago. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to share again, but now show you my Zoom environment so you see what it looks like when I create breakouts. It's a little challenging here because, of course, I'm the only person in breakouts. But when you click on breakouts, and I did it through the More button on the bottom, you can do automatic or manual creation. You can sort participants into any number of rooms. And when you do it manually, and I create these breakout rooms, I get a list like this that goes from breakout room 1 to 5. I can name them. I can then assign people to them. Unfortunately, if I had a list of 20 people, when I clicked on assign, I could click them into those rooms. You can recreate the rooms at any moment. So if I wanted to assign participants into 5 rooms automatically, I could now recreate those rooms. I have options here too. I can move participants into a breakout automatically or allow students to choose to go into them. I can allow them to return to the main session. And then I have a countdown timer to let them know that the session is coming to a close. So that's how we create breakout rooms. One of the other things that I do is allow students to use a Google Doc when they're in a breakout. So a copy of that is shown here. And so this is a copy of my breakout room 1. In fact, some students, faculty in this case, wrote a few things in here in last week's session about what they were doing in their current norms in their in-person. What is implicit and what is explicit? And what do they want to do in their online classroom? They want to be able to brainstorm norms and use Google Doc to do that, which is an excellent thing. Other folks down below wrote other things in theirs as they were working on it. So now I'm going to stop sharing, come back to you. So after 10 or 15 minutes, students would come back into the room, however you set it up with your timing, and then you can allow them to screen share their screen and share out the content that they discussed. These breakouts are incredibly important, and I recommend using a 10-minute breakout every 30 to 40 minutes of online classroom. I'm going to go back to sharing my Google environment application and go back to my slides and continue on in our presentation. It's critical to give people really good instructions about what they're supposed to do when they enter into into a breakout room. So what is social presence? It's a sense of community, knowing one another, connecting to one another. And this has been studied for several decades. In the online environment, the social presence is incredibly important. It's been demonstrated to help perceptions of learning. It improves student satisfaction and instructor satisfaction with the online course. It can improve learning performance and has strong ties to creating an inclusive learning and teaching environment. Have some references here that if you'd like to look those up. This is taken from Randy Garrison's work called The Development of a Community of Inquiry Over Time in an Online Course. And there's three elements here of presence. The two on the bottom are the ones that you're most familiar with as an instructor. You often create a cognitive presence through the slides or through prompts or through your lectures. Sometimes you have a particular triggering event if you're talking about a threshold concept. So in physics, if I were introducing the uncertainty principle, I would expect students to have a sense of puzzlement, something that they haven't talked to before and something which is a new paradigm. We often do exploration or integration. We look at how do we resolve things in debates or in social policy. Teaching presence, we're responsible for setting curriculum and methods, for shaping how the course goes, and for working through direct instruction, as well as facilitating discourse, dialogue, and discussion. But today I'm really going to focus on these three things: open communication, group cohesion, and a personal or affective domain. The ideas of examples here are we want to create risk-free expression, a strong learning climate and communications among the students. We want that group and individual identity is respected and connected, and we want students to be able to express themselves and to self-project their ideas. It's pretty true that the consensus over the last 15 years of online research and teaching have shown that social presence is a really incredibly valuable thing in both the design and instruction of online courses. So what might you do before class? Be transparent, as we've already said. Write a pre-session email, several emails. Be very specific in your syllabus and your learning management system. Think about creating a session guide for every session that you do. Link to the Zoom meeting, link to any worksheets that you have, link to any readings that you want done, and then have a flow in the meeting so the students have a one-stop shop. You can put that in your learning management system, connect it as a Google Doc, or send it out as a Word document beforehand. I will often start with icebreakers in the chat as the students come in, something to bring them into the space and make them feel comfortable and invited. We do drawing and typing on slides. Don't forget to save them, just like I demonstrated a few minutes ago. We do breakouts and link to Google Slots or Google Slides. And then I encourage continuously verbal participation in small and large group environments. Here's a simple example of something you might put up right at the beginning of class. You can show it on your slides as you're showing or things like that, and give students an opportunity to write in something about what they've done. It doesn't have to be a complicated prompt. You can do it in the chat window or in other spaces, just something that brings them back and gets them talking and gets them integrated into that environment. Here's another chat that I do in my trainings. Again, invite people to annotate. Again, bring people's ideas forward, allow them to ask questions, and have a conversation with them about how they might start their class. How do we really have 5 central ideas about creating social presence in your class? Be sure to give extra time. Everything takes longer in the online environment. Remember, your students who haven't been in online environments have spent the last several decades of their lives in in-person environments. So they have many habits that they know how to work and operate and learn in an in-person environment. This is very new. All these habits are new. Raising the hand, writing in a chat, writing in a doc, working in a small breakout room. Make sure you give really clear instructions and that you do that for all of your activities and breakouts. Be specific and transparent, the details, repeat the details at every transition. Continuously invite participation. Even if what you're doing is a didactic lecture, engaged lecture, try to do it in sections of 5 to 7 or 8 minutes and then stop. Allow students 60 seconds to write down what they're thinking through, have them share it, have them go into breakouts and share it, and then come back and continue. Give them an opportunity to stop. And the real reason for that is these online sessions have a great deal of cognitive overload. Not only may students be multitasking, but they will also have been tired of being in Zoom meetings or in online learning sessions multiple hours a day. We already know how tiring this is for us. That cognitive overload is real. What we think of when we do universal design for learning is we think of both what we learn, how we learn, as well as the why of learning. In what we learn, we really focus on how we gather facts, how we categorize, how we observe, how we create connections among all those observations. So in universal design for learning, it's critical that we provide multiple means of representations. As a STEM person, I provide equations, I provide videos of examples, I provide graphs, I provide conceptual drawings. And so I provide multiple representations so that students can connect those representations and use them to learn in different ways that they do best. In strategic networks, we think a lot about how we're performing tasks. Here's the application space. How do we now organize and express those ideas? How do we synthesize? How do we be creative? How are we critical of those ideas? And so here, you want to differentiate the way students can express themselves. Allow them to write, allow them to do asynchronous work in discussion boards and other kinds of things. Everything you do in asynchronous, that is everything you do between classes, please make sure you bring that forward into your online environment synchronously so that you value it and you affirm their out of class work. That's critical and will be very, very valuable for you and for them. And then finally, the why of learning. These are affective domains, our affective networks. How do we stay motivated? How do we feel about it? How do we think about being challenged and excited? And so you want to provide multiple means of engagement. That is small groups, large groups, one-on-ones, all kinds of things in ways that they can engage. In creating social presence in your sessions, don't forget to join, draw some fun things, put up some slides, have fun doing it, just the way you would in person. Use your tools thoughtfully. Don't just use it for the sake of showing off in your Zoom skills, but use your tools and connect those tools to the pedagogy that you want to do. Here's another activity in this set of workshops, where you might engage your graduate students or faculty in doing a workshop like this, just asking them again to raise their hand, activate audio and video, and chat about what their classroom looks like and how they promote student engagement. Here's another sharing exercise that I often do with folks in trainings. I ask them to open up their annotation bar. I ask them to take their drawing tool and choose the arrow and perhaps do a thicker line associated with it. And then I ask them to connect these outcomes or pedagogies to the tools that they might do in Zoom. And so, for example, around accountability, we might use cameras and microphones to keep people thinking about that. If I want a back and forth discussion, I'm definitely going to want to think about breakout groups. Ease of use is whiteboarding, of course, and perhaps polls. That's very easy to use. Full participation, you might then go back to camera and microphone. Longer, thoughtful responses, things Google Doc. And this screen fills up very quickly, connecting how you think about the pedagogy, how you want to create that environment, and what the tool might be to do that. Finally, a quick summary towards the end. Polls are like quick clicker questions, quick response. They're relatively easy to use in Zoom. Just make sure you set them up with your Zoom ID that you use every single session, and that will store all of the polls in it. The emoticons, the little claps, the thumbs up, those are nice ways to engage students. Quick polls on your list of participants. And if you're just doing a, 1 versus 2 or true versus false, you can use the yes, no capacity in your participant list, and it will sum them up. It will add up the positives and the negatives. And so you can do that as a quick poll. Chat is great for introverts, for non-native speakers, can be accessible and requires some facilitation. We recommend your teaching assistant, or if you're in a small class, even rotating through other students, and even encouraging, again, in a small class, students to answer other students. It's a very nice way of doing that. Mics and cameras. This is a tricky space these days. We're really not sure in a truly inclusive classroom. Students might not be in a good position to use their camera. They might have a strong delay. They might not just be in a place where they feel comfortable doing it. And students should have the option, even though they should be encouraged as much as possible, certainly in small groups, to try to have their camera on to create social presence. Whiteboards and Google Docs, good for brainstorming. They have a slower pace. You can really dig in and think. You can preload, prompts and ideas in there. Have them do analysis. Have them do annotation through perusal live in the meeting. Then breakout rooms, lots of student co-creation. Students can bring this back, and it goes beyond think, pair, share. You can facilitate it or not. You can have teaching assistants go in or learning assistants. That's really up to you and depends on your learning environment. What do you do after class? Send copies of your slides, your notes, share your Google Docs, a recording if applicable. Check in with your students. How's it going? Connect with the instructor or the TA or whoever is in the class. And then always practice self-care as a community, reaching out and allowing students to come and talk to you whenever they so desire. Here's a wrap-up slide that I often use for my session. Again, takeaway, what am I most excited to do? And we give 1 minute for them to write it down, activate audio and video, and be responsive. So a very interactive kind of space that you want to try to create. Sometimes we ask, our final slide is to ask our participants, just put your questions in the chat window. We'll take them in order they received and maybe create a frequently asked questions list and share additional resources after the training. So thank you very much. That's the end of today's session. And I wish you all the best of luck in your online learning and teaching.